All right, guys, it's time for the Next Level Guy Show, a men's interview, interest, and improvement-focused podcast featuring interviews with the greats from all industries to help you better your life. Each week, a new episode features an interview with one of the greats, covering all aspects of their story, from life hacks to tips and protocols that have allowed them to live life on the next level. We then highlight concrete action steps that you can use to improve your life. And now, your host, Ian Dawson Mackay.
And today's guest is Rosie Miller, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt and a performance and mindset coach. Rosie is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt under Andre Carvalho, a seasoned competitor and a dedicated performance coach with over a decade of experience in both training and competition. She's worked with some of the biggest names in the sport, including Atos, IBJJF, and Flow Grappling, as a writer and content creator. Her Instagram is a goldmine of free techniques and helpful prompts that will help you level up your game. Beyond competing, Rosie has taught kids classes, developed training curriculums, and led nutrition and strength camps for athletes striving to reach their peak performance. But her expertise extends far beyond the mats. Before Jiu-Jitsu, she spent 2 decades as a competitive dancer and pursued a graduate degree in exercise physiology and nutrition, a background that shaped her holistic approach to athletic development. Over the past 15 years, she's helped countless individuals build strength, improve nutrition, and achieve their goals, whether that's competition podiums, a stronger mindset, or simply becoming the best version of themselves. Rosie believes that success in any pursuit isn't just about working hard, it's about working smart. Her philosophy blends discipline with adaptability, guiding athletes to find the balance between pushing forward and knowing when to pause. Whether it's on the mats, in the gym, or in life, she teaches her students how to develop the resilience, confidence, and mindset needed to truly transform. At the heart of Rosie's coaching is a simple truth. Real change happens off the mats as much as it does on, and she's here to help you make that change. And in this interview, we discuss how to find yourself through your BJJ training, and how you can use your training to express and develop yourself, your identity, and work on that areas of yourself you want to develop, and so much more. And now, let's get to the interview. I cannot thank you enough for coming on. It's a joy to have somebody who I've followed for so long on social media. And you're, like we were saying before we started, I learned so much by watching your Instagram videos. But for those who maybe don't recognise the name, how would you describe who the badass Rosie Miller is?
Oh, gosh, I have to describe myself. Well, I think I'm just someone who really values learning. And it's interesting because even though my jujitsu Instagram page really focuses on jujitsu, I have actually gotten feedback from people who don't even train jujitsu, who say that they're just learning how to learn, or some of the lessons that I share about jujitsu help them in life too. So I'm not exactly sure how I would describe myself other than someone who just really likes sharing my life experience. And a lot of that is learned through training jujitsu. So whether it's directly related to, something on the mat or just in life in general, I'm just a curious person who loves learning and loves sharing all of that.
I love it because you've just got this unique kind of coaching style that your videos are such high quality, but you've got such a fun and friendly way of promoting it that you just can't help but learn when you show a technique in that. But you went from doing English with a focus on poetry to dancing, then to boxing, to jiu-jitsu. You've talked about having older brothers and being a tomboy when you were younger. Was this the path you were always destined to go on, do you think?
In a way, I think it was. So I was raised in the South, in Tallahassee, Florida, in a very kind of traditional town. Now, my family is not very traditional at all. We kind of stuck out like a sore thumb in this city. I grew up in a neighborhood called Rose Hill, and we would joke and call ourselves the Rose Hillbillies because we just didn't quite fit in the neighborhood. And my family's just very eclectic, multicultural, and my family always really encouraged us to kind of find our own way, find our own identity, explore and stay curious. And so I think as, a young girl growing up in kind of this traditional town, because my parents encouraged me to explore, I wasn't afraid of kind of being interested in things that other girls my age weren't really interested in. So I grew up as a competitive dancer from the time I was very, very young. But I always had this passionate interest for combat sports, for kind of kung fu movies, for action movies.
Okay.
And I didn't pursue it until I was much older, but it was always in me. It had always been something I was fascinated by.
So did you get any pushback? Because I know in traditional circles, girls are flimsy, where men are meant to do all these and it's that silly attitudes that still prevail in a lot of sports now. Did you have any kind of fight from your parents, from locals, to kind of say, no, you stick to dancing instead of taking on combat sports? Or was it just rough and tumble like your brothers? I want to do that, and I want to see and fulfill what I see on the screen.
No pushback from my family. Absolutely none. They were not surprised at all when I expressed my interest in combat sports. Growing up, my parents would even joke and say, we're very we want to make sure our boys are okay, but we know Rose is going to take care of herself. She'll be fine. Because I think I was just always a little bit feisty. I had an attitude for sure. Growing up, I was not afraid to speak my mind. So I was always a little bit, I was very assertive. And I think my mom really appreciated that about me, but I think it also kind of scared her a little bit. So no surprise from my parents, no pushback from my parents. Maybe a little bit from the older generations in my family, and certainly from people who didn't know me very well. I would get comments about not ruining a pretty face and stuff like that, and I just never really bought into it. I never really took it too seriously. I think I was just always so interested in whatever it was I was interested in. So the outside noise didn't really mean that much to me, I guess. I never really took it seriously.
It's sad, isn't it, in a way, in this day and age where girls are viewed by their looks, where guys are viewed by their abilities. And even now, we're so far removed from a lot of these ridiculously stupid viewpoints, and we're still ruled by a lot of these, and it's sad that girls don't get that opportunities. And that's why I think it's so good for you as a role model to be showing people, by coaching, by introducing them into this amazing sport. I love how they call it the gentle art, and you get your arse kicked for most of the training session. But you did the initial jump from dancing to boxing, and I heard you talk in an interview about how it helped your footwork and your rhythm and stuff like that. But you took a bit of time to go from boxing to jiu-jitsu. What was the sort of hold up at that point, that mental block? Because I had it myself, overanalyzing, self-sabotaging, you name it. Did you know what it was that was holding you back at that point?
Yeah. So I think at the time I wasn't really aware, but in hindsight, I think it makes a lot of sense to me. So I'd always been very athletic my whole life, or, involved in extracurricular activities. And so dancing was very natural to me. I didn't remember being bad at dance. I didn't remember having to learn dance. I didn't remember being uncoordinated. And so when I started boxing, that was really the first time I remembered being bad at something and having to learn something from scratch. I think maybe a lot of kids have this experience in middle school, maybe, or elementary school, where they remember getting introduced to something. But I've been dancing for as long as I can remember. I don't remember a time without dance. And so I don't remember that initial learning phase. And so starting boxing was a very new experience for me, not just because I was pursuing a combat sport, but because I was truly a beginner at something for the first time that I could really remember and appreciate. And it was scary for me. And I had to learn how to be bad at something. I had to learn how to be a beginner. I had to learn how to not be the expert. And it was such a profound and necessary experience. And I think it held me back from taking a lot of the risks I wanted to take in boxing. I didn't compete at the level that maybe I might have had a slight urge to do more than just smokers and like little local matches, but I never pursued that, I think because of fear. And then when I was thinking about getting started in jujitsu, I remember, it was mostly men training jujitsu at the time. I did have really powerful role models in mixed martial arts, like Gina Carano, Ronda Rousey. They were all coming up, and women's mixed martial arts was really gaining popularity. So I did have some good examples of women who were doing it at a high level, but I was still scared to be new at something again. Um, I was, like I said, I was not really good at being bad at things. It was a very humbling experience. And so in hindsight, I think that's really kind of what held me back is I didn't want to have to go through that learning curve, but I'm so glad I did. And I truly feel like jujitsu, jujitsu satisfies something in me that boxing never did. And having my experience with boxing and feeling like I didn't really take the risks I wanted to take, it really prepared me and helped me go into jujitsu with a much better mindset. I was not expecting really to master it easily or quickly. And I think I learned it even much slower than I realized. And I think maybe that's what's helped me know how to coach people is that it was so not natural to me that I really had to dissect it. I really had to figure out how to learn jujitsu. And I think that has helped me teach other people who maybe feel similarly, maybe feel like they're a late bloomer in jujitsu or like it's not natural to them. It took me a long time to figure it out. And now, nearly 10 years in, I feel like I've just now figured out how to learn. I feel like I'm just now really understanding jujitsu, how I think some people understand it much, much sooner into their journey.
Suppose that they say you only learn the basics once you get your black belt. You've only leveled up the first time when you get to black belt. Because I have felt like we were very similar kin. When you were talking about how you didn't feel you'd a loss of sense of self when you went to jiu-jitsu as a beginner, and you were suddenly becoming like a total beginner, and you're like, I don't like being bad at this, and whenever I hear you always talk so analytical, so deep and emotional, and it made me thinking she's got a very similar story to me, and I think that's why I stopped at blue belt till I've just recently signed back up. Was I didn't like being the beginner again. I didn't like sucking. I didn't like getting my ass kicked because everything I did, I was good at up to that point. And suddenly you're like, whoa, I don't like this at all. How did you get over that initial sort of loss of identity? Loss of the attack on the ego, the hit to being Rosie that couldn't just turn up and just do it. How did you adapt it, do you think?
Well, I think part of it is actually when I started jujitsu, I went in expecting to be totally lost and expecting to, be a complete beginner. Because I am fairly physical, I was able to get away with strength for a while. This ended up hurting me in the long run. But I think when I first started, I actually had this facade that I knew more than I did. And then around, it was like 2 months into training, I competed for the first time. And that was when I gained this radical self-awareness that I sucked and I had no idea what was happening. And so it kind of eased the blow that I'm a very physical person, pretty athletic. So my first couple months, it's like, all right, I learned the warm-ups. I can do these movements. And I actually talked about that in a post today. Being able to move, I think really helped me. And then that kind of got me hooked on the sport. And then after my first competition, I realized how much I did not know. I got armbarred by a teenager in like 30 seconds. Maybe it was longer. I don't know. It felt very quick to me in the moment. And after that tournament, I wasn't discouraged. I actually appreciated that I now had kind of a benchmark to work with. And I don't know. I just never let it discourage me anymore. I just let it excite me. The more I realized I didn't know, the more I wanted to learn. And so instead of making it become like a part of my identity that I am bad at this or I'm bad at sports or any type of, identifying statement you could make by being new at something, I just got excited because I saw all these people who had been training longer than me. And they were constantly reminding me that they were also a white belt at one point. So I just figured if I could figure out how to learn this, that I could be there one day too. So every time I realized that there was something I didn't know, I took it as a positive. This is a gap that I can bridge. This is a new opportunity instead of this says something about me and who I am and what my abilities are.
Because you said once how it was hard to stop caring about your progress. It was hard to feel judged by the belt. And once you let go of that, you just thought, fuck it. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to achieve my, you stopped caring and you did it for fun. You did it to enjoy the sport and let go. You enjoyed the process and let go of the result. How did you do that? Because I really wish I can find that in myself, but I struggle. And I blame my depression, anxiety, whatever it is. And I know you said you've had mental health struggles. How did you find that in yourself to love just failure again, love enjoying making mistakes? Because I think so many people struggle with that.
Yeah, I love that question. So I actually haven't really talked about mental health that much on any of the podcasts I've been on. So I like that I can kind of talk about that a little bit here. I think, and this is something that I did not learn immediately, or I wasn't able to put into words immediately. I think it's something I'm just now able to look back on and put into words. But I think for me, training was not about winning or losing. Competing was not about winning or losing. For me, training and competing is about expressing my core values. So I have a core value that is, one, I like to stay curious about things instead of like impose my opinion, for example, or impose a judgment. I also really value challenging myself and doing hard things. And jujitsu is definitely a way for me to express that. So then intrinsically, it becomes less about the outcome. Just innately, the practice of jujitsu, the reason I do it has nothing really to do with the outcome. Do I want to be successful at it? Do I want to learn? Absolutely. But the main reason I do it is that expression of doing something hard, that expression of staying curious about something that is challenging. So when I focus on kind of the role it's playing in my life instead of how I am defined on the mat, it becomes easier to worry less about, am I good enough? Am I good or bad? And more about, well, what does showing up say about me? What am I able to give every time I go to the mat? And I feel like it just continues to make me a better and better person, not only in jujitsu, but it allows me to reinforce those values that I want to express everywhere in life, not only in jujitsu.
I love that. I wish I had you to speak to before I'd given up, because I can remember going to training and I was good and I was getting taps and stuff. I wasn't like the standout, and I was so not used to being Mr. Fix-It or the guy that would go in and just be good at it, and people would say, "Oh yeah, he's good at everything he touches," and then suddenly having an area of my life where I was dominated, and you're meant to be masculine and brave and tough and that. And then when I remember reading your post, it's like, she gets it. She understands the kind of mental blocks we have about it, about failure, about not being able to achieve what we want, how to overcome the fear of failure and stuff. And I love that about your posts, is that you go into great detail about these things and you explain it, and it's very heartfelt, and it's really helpful, because a lot of people take it up and then leave because of a number of reasons. And I bet you if you asked a lot of people, mental health is probably a big aspect of it. So how would you work with your clients to make sure that they have that kind of attitude when they start? How to approach jiu-jitsu to be successful in enjoying it, not just successful in the actual results?
Yeah. So I ask my clients a lot of questions before I tell them anything. So a big thing that we do is we get really clear on what each individual person's ultimate goals are. Like, what ultimate outcome do you want from jiu-jitsu, or do you want from your fitness journey? Like, where do you want to be in a year from now in all aspects of your life, right? Because it gets really easy to hyper-focus on jiu-jitsu. But most people I work with, I'm sorry, can I grab my dog for 1 second?
Cool.
Sorry. She's getting into a bag of treats. Nope, nope, nope. I have a little puppy who was trying to get into these treats.
I always love sometimes you can see people's eyes kind of going.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
I'm up in my parents, like I'm visiting my parents just now, so I'm in their house, and every so often my dog will burst through the door and jump on the bed, and you'll see him kind of back and forth, and they're like,
yeah.
You have to say, get out. What kind of puppy is it?
Rue, come here. Let's see if she'll come on screen. Come on. She thinks she's going to get a treat. Come here. Come here. All right. Maybe not. I have 2 dogs. One is like a pit bull boxer type mix, but the puppy, come here. She doesn't want to come. She's like a little chihuahua type.
Aww.
Little mutt. So I have 1 big dog and 1 tiny dog, but they get along really well. Oh, here she is. There she is.
Oh, you cute. I always love that kind of like, well, what am I getting here? You picked me up, I want my treat.
Yeah. So, all right. So we were talking about how I work with my clients and kind of their mindset in jiu-jitsu. So I never really force anything. Some people want to talk about mindset in jiu-jitsu. Some people don't. Some people just come to me for nutrition or strength training, but I do find that it's all related. And so we address it as it comes up. And so, for example, I was working with one woman who was like, I'm preparing for Master Worlds, but I'm not even sure I want to compete after this tournament. And I think what happens with a lot of people is they start to feel pressure on what competition or being a competitor, whatever that means in jiu-jitsu, is supposed to look like. Because we have professional level athletes training so closely and, oftentimes being at the same tournaments as amateur athletes or recreational athletes, it can be easy to think that how I train as an amateur or a recreational person or someone who does this for fun needs to be the same as what these people are doing whose livelihood depends on it. And the truth is, it's not the same. And most people who do jiu-jitsu, most people who compete in jiu-jitsu, unless you are the top elite, and I train with those people, I see them every day. The truth is, most people have a life outside of jiu-jitsu, have priorities outside of jiu-jitsu. And yes, the people at the very top, sometimes they do too. Sometimes they have families, but jiu-jitsu still plays a much different role in their life. It is literally their job, their income, their livelihood, right? And so if you are pursuing this for personal growth, even if you want to do it as a career, there's like levels to this, right? But you have to find out what role it plays in your life, and identify how that fits in with who you are off the mat. And that's where the core values practice really comes in handy, to make sure that we are pursuing this as an expression of what your values are in life, instead of as this external third-party demand that is detracting from your life. So what this client recognized was, one, she was putting a lot of pressure on herself to, cut weight and be this hardcore person, when really that was sucking the joy out of it. And she felt like she needed to be the smallest weight class she could make in order to be a competitor or compete a certain way and prepare a certain way. And it was taking the fun out of it. And so after, before Master Worlds, we kind of changed course. And I recommended that she did not cut weight, that we stayed at a weight class that allowed her to enjoy other aspects of her life, still train hard, still be dedicated, but also have energy to be a mom and a business owner, and all these other things that were very important to her. And we immediately saw an energy shift. She was immediately more excited to compete. She had the best performance that she's ever had in competition at Master Worlds, just by aligning her actions with her values. And so jiu-jitsu, again, became an expression of that, instead of something taking away from her life or this distraction from her life. It became like a very integrated part of her life. And I also think this is what the people at the highest level are doing too, only their values and their career are more united in jiu-jitsu. So, if they want to give 100% to their job and 100% to jiu-jitsu, those happen to be the same thing in most times, right? So I think knowing what your values are, how you want to express yourself in jujitsu, what you want your life to look like outside of jujitsu and with jujitsu, and finding that harmony is really important. A lot of people talk about balance. And when I think about balance, I think about equal parts of everything, or everything being on the same, a level playing field. But when I think about harmony, I think about enough of each aspect, right? If we think about a chord in music, it's not necessarily equal parts of every note. It's enough of each tone to make the sound that we want. And so it might not be equal parts of everything in your life, but as long as you have enough of each of your priorities, you're going to have a more harmonious life. It's going to feel better instead of trying to give 100% to everything. You just have to give enough to each thing.
Damn, I wish I had you found your work so much sooner, because it just hits home. It explains why I feel the way I was feeling, because I would feel so anxious about every training session that if my training partner said, "Oh, I can't make it today," I'd be like, "Oh, brilliant! I've got this to do. I'd always have an excuse." And the times we would turn up, I would hate when we'd have to shift partners and have a new person to roll with, because in my head I was like, if I lose this, they're going to think I'm crap. If I do something bad, they're going to think I'm crap. And I was constantly having this like internal prison that you dragged along with you. And I like that attitude of, how do you make jiu-jitsu something fun and enjoyable and fit in with your life rather than something that's a struggle, a challenge? How would you use that exercise with somebody? Like, how would you get them to understand their core beliefs? Is it just by asking questions?
A lot of it is by asking questions or even reflecting on your life. So some people, when we reflect on the actions that we take, so maybe I say, hey, look at your life over the last week or month, whatever time period feels relevant. And I would say, if you had to indicate what your values are only based off of the actions that you've taken, not by how you feel. If you just look at the actions you've taken and the choices you've made, what does that say about what your values are? Does that align with what you rationally think your values are? And sometimes we see alignment and sometimes we see misalignment. Sometimes we say, oh, actually, my values aren't what I thought they were because these actions actually feel very true for me. Now I have to revisit that. Or sometimes we say, my actions and my values or my expectations have not been aligning. And that opens up the room to kind of do some further exploration. So there's different ways. I have like worksheets and stuff that we work through to kind of figure this out and figure out what's most important to each individual. Now, you mentioned something that I think is really important about, what if I do this and I go with this person and I fail, or they think I suck, right? Because we can oftentimes get ourselves very excited to prepare for something, but then taking action on those decisions is the hard part, because we feel like that's where we can pass or fail. And I think that's because we see action, we see that test as like this end point. And sometimes it can feel like a public failure is much bigger than private victories. And so if I go with a new partner and they see me fail, that's going to feel a lot bigger because it feels like the stakes are higher. It's a new person. They don't know me. They just know this experience they had with me. And if I fail, then that defines me. It feels big, right? But the truth is, a public failure or taking action, taking a risk and failing is just another piece of the whole puzzle. It's just another piece of those private successes and failures that we've had along the way. And I think we see, like preparation, mindset, training, nutrition, strength training, all of this leading up to this moment that's going to determine, do we get to be confident? Do I get to believe in myself? Do I deserve this? But that's not the truth. This thing that feels so big at the end is really just another piece of the puzzle that's going to continue to feed information on, is the way I'm training working for me? Is it benefiting me or not? Is it helping or hurting? Do I need to change anything about the way I'm training? Do I need to change anything about my self-talk? Do I need to change anything about my nutrition? It all feeds each other. So it's not this linear path where we prepare, we test. It's all fueling itself. So when we can look at that test, that perceived failure as just another piece of information, another piece of data, another part of this experience, and it's kind of all together instead of this linear fashion, I think it becomes much easier to utilize failure instead of be determined by it or judged by it. Easier said than done, but it is also something that needs to be practiced if you want to move through it.
I love that. That really, like, it's really hard not to stop and start taking notes. I keep forgetting I've got to ask the next question because it's like light bulbs are just going off and going, that's why I do that. That's why I do that. And because I used to have the identity of, I started at 36 or something like that. And I'm 41 now, and I stopped for about a year and a bit now, but I did it for about just over 2 years. And it really, really was, I was loving it and enjoying it when I was good. But if I tapped, I would be annoyed. If I got idiot sweeped in a game, like when you go round, like keep the kettle boiling, where you just go round and round, 3 people in the middle, and you would just keep going in, challenging them. No one cared if you passed, failed, or whatever. But in my head, I was keeping score. And I would go home sometimes and spend a weekend ruing about the mistakes I made. Completely stupid. But I couldn't let go of that. And I'm assuming that's ego. But I would also tell myself, no, you're 36. Of course, you're not going to be as fast as these young boys. But then I learned pressure passing. Completely different story. You started it, was it 24? How did you find that kind of, because I think you said in the Submission Shark interview you did, where you went, I think I started at the right time. How do we get that mindset that it doesn't matter when you start, the fact that you've started is the best thing you've done?
Yeah. So, first of all, why worry about what you can't control, right? That's just going to lead to suffering, anxiety, excuses, really. If you keep saying, if only I started at this point, you're only holding yourself back. So why think unhelpful thoughts, right? There's, I read a lot on mindset, and some of the top mindset coaches in the world, they say you have to tell yourself whatever thought is helpful. For example, if you are on a hot streak and you feel like you are succeeding everywhere, you're going to tell yourself, I'm on a roll. I'm due to win, right? I'm on a roll. I'm going to keep succeeding. I'm going to keep winning. But if you're on a losing streak, you flip the script and you say, I'm due to win. Probability says if I've missed this many shots, I'm due to make my next one, right? So the narrative doesn't have to be exactly the same. It has to be whatever helps you. And I think a lot of people think that if I think I've been on a losing streak, I'm due to win, they think when they're on a winning streak, they're due to fail. And you can't think like that, right? And so a lot of what we talk about with mindset is creating whatever narrative helps you progress and helps you move forward. And so it's the same thing with like when you start jujitsu. If you start as a kid, it doesn't mean you would have been better off starting later. Or if you started later, it doesn't mean you'd be better off starting at a different point in time. You have to find the narrative that fits your situation and makes it the most helpful, best possibility for the best outcome that you want, right? So I started at 24. I can't control that I didn't start sooner. Fireworks. Can you see that?
That's great. Go.
Yeah. So I can't control that I didn't start earlier, even though I'm sure it would be cool. It would be absolutely great to be a 10-year-old prodigy in jujitsu, but that's not my story. And so I'm not going to waste time and mental energy wishing that was my story. I started right when I needed it, and I've turned that into a great journey and a great life in the last 10 years. So I think just reminding myself that, what good does it do to think unhelpful thoughts? The night I got my blue belt, actually, we went out to a Brazilian club and I ran into a very prominent black belt there. And he's the one who kind of told me that day. He said, jiu-jitsu will find you when you need it most. So, because I felt like I needed to disclaim, like, oh, I started in my 20s. And now that I have more perspective, I see that, man, people start at all different phases of life and they make it mean something to them. And that's really the most important thing. And so that's something that's just really kind of stuck with me over the years.
It's time for a quick break. There are millions of potential products to buy, so how do you know which ones are worth your hard-earned money? Simple. You go to nextlevelguy.com/affiliates and explore those that will transform and improve your life. You'll find deals, listener exclusives, and special offers with some great companies. Recommendations are 100% honest and only on items Ian has tried or believes in. The companies showcased will make you a better man in all areas of your life. Simply go to nextlevelguy.com/affiliates and level up.
I knew you were going to be good, but I didn't expect this because it's there was so much of like the mental health mindset stuff, and then there was the technique stuff, and I could probably do a podcast on both because your technique stuff is amazing, your videos, your instructionals, your coaching, but it's your mindset, it's the fixes that I think you help so many people with. So what would you do for people who are ruining themselves after a bad training session? How do you mentally reset to go back into the next session so you're not carrying this emotional negative energy of I need to get up on you because you tapped me last time, but just see it as you're a step on the journey that you were talking about earlier?
Yeah. So I want to go ahead and make this clear. Just because I have this mindset and I train this mindset, it does not mean that I don't have days where I come home from training crying or where I feel like I want to run to the bathroom and melt down because I feel like a complete failure.
I call them weekdays.
Yes. Weekdays, W-E-A-K and W-E-E-K. Weekdays.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So I absolutely still have those feelings. I still have negative thoughts. But that is the point of practicing this, right? I like to say meditation is easy when you are in a quiet room with no noise, right? You can be Zen. But can you also be Zen and meditate when you are in the middle of, 5 o'clock traffic and people are honking at you and cutting you off, right? That's when you really need that mindfulness. And the same is with mindset and mental training. It's easy to talk about this on a podcast away from anything triggering, but can you practice those same mental habits when you're met with a hard day, when you're crying after training, when you feel like a failure? How quickly can you reframe? And it doesn't mean that you are going to feel like it's true immediately. It just means you're able to take control of your conscious thoughts and stop the floodgates of negativity. Even if you still feel defeated, even if you still feel inadequate, you're able to start consciously rebuilding and consciously sending yourself the thoughts that are going to be most helpful to you. So it's not only about how many times you get back up, it's about how quickly you can start that process. And it will not and doesn't have to feel completely true. It just has to be helpful. So I like to actually stay away from like positive and negative thoughts because sometimes if we're like feigning positivity, it can just feel fake, right? Like if I'm in my car crying after training because I feel utterly worthless and like I failed at every exchange, you can do it, just doesn't hit quite right. But if I'm able to actually take that narrative and turn it into something that feels a little bit helpful, I'm going to be more willing to think those thoughts. So I can ask myself, is what I'm telling myself right now helpful or hurtful? If it's hurtful, I'm going to start reframing. And I'm going to start turning anything that feels negative into a helpful alternative. For example, I'm trying to think of a real life example. Well, one thing I do after training often is I do ESP journaling. What's one area I put a lot of success, or what's one area I put a lot of effort? What's one area I succeeded today? What's one area I made progress, even if I didn't succeed? Okay. And so this can kind of turn perceived failures into places of progress or opportunity. So, maybe my guard got passed or whatever, right? Well, okay, my guard got passed here, but now I have that awareness of this position. And maybe that position has been happening a lot of times. And so this next area that I'm going to make progress is I'm going to kind of zone in on that. And I know this is a problem area for me. And I know this is somewhere that I need to improve. And this is going to level up my jujitsu. So exposure becomes a positive thing. Right. So I'm not sure if that was the best example, but that's one way that we can kind of look at perceived failure and say, all right, this is actually something I need to improve. It doesn't mean I'm bad at jujitsu. It doesn't mean I'm bad. It just means this is an area that needs improvement potentially. Alternatively, if it's kind of a one-off thing, we don't need to overanalyze and overly dwell on our failures. It's okay. Sometimes we just have a crap day, and as long as we're being real with ourselves and holding ourselves accountable and actually looking at our patterns, it's okay to say, hey, today was a crap day. Those days happen. Good thing I get to try again later today or tomorrow or whenever your next training session is.
I love that. I love that approach of like conditioning the brain to kind of interrupt that thoughts of you suck, you're worthless, you're this, and that, to actually go, yeah, you could improve on this. Let's focus on that next time. Because I think that I did cognitive behavior therapy when I was really bad with depression, and I remember somebody saying, "You're not your thoughts. That's just your brain throwing all these prompts out based on what you've been telling yourself for all these years." And it's like you're saying you have to reposition that, and it's like you're saying create the new neural pathways.
Yes,
this happens. And this is how we want you to react, and that's what you're actually going to do. And I love that. I love that kind of approach. And do you find you get a lot of people who'd say, no, I could do jiu-jitsu well, but I've got a damaged knee. I've hurt my shoulder, so I could be there. Because you've had a lot of health issues yourself, and you've come back. What did these things sort of teach you about why we wear these as a sort of badge of honor, as much as... what did they teach you about life and what we're truly capable of?
Yeah, it's funny. I have a minor injury right now. I pulled my hamstring or my glute earlier this week training.
I like you call it minor.
Yeah, but it's minor. It's not inhibiting me. It's just a little annoying, a little uncomfortable. And I turned to one of my coaches yesterday and I said, I know this is kind of a sick thought, and I know I shouldn't need an injury to do this, but I kind of like these small injuries because I go to train, and so my favorite guard to play is Tarantula. And in order for me to play Tarantula, I have to extend my leg very far. And that's actually how I pulled the muscle. And so I'm avoiding that guard right now. I'm avoiding my favorite guard, the one I feel the best at. And I said, in a sick way, I kind of like being injured because it reminds me that I can explore other ways to do jujitsu. I can do other things I wouldn't ordinarily do. I'm playing guard on the opposite side now. I'm getting into positions I wouldn't ordinarily seek out just because I'm trying to avoid irritating my hamstring. And I said, I know I shouldn't need an injury to do it, but it's a nice reminder. And so again, kind of reframing anything as a positive, if it's the type of injury or health issue that I can work around. But my more significant injuries, like my concussions, ACL surgery, those sorts of things. ACL surgery, not so much. I was a blue belt when that happened, and I was still like all in on, jujitsu is my identity. It's who I am. If I can't do this, I don't know who I am. I was very much still in that state of mind. I was very active competing. And so I handled my ACL injury much differently than the concussions. My whole life was still jiu-jitsu. Rehab became my new sport. I think it was good the way I handled it for that time in my life because that was my one and only priority. And I showed myself that I will find a way to train and, stay focused no matter what. So I couldn't train jujitsu, but I could study. I was taking notes. I was still at every single live event. I was going and I was watching training. I was doing my rehab. I was strength training only upper body and my unaffected leg. I was kind of crazy. I was showing up to the gym on crutches and the whole everything. If I saw that girl now, I'd be like, girl, you need to chill, Then by the time I started experiencing my concussions, this was after COVID, And my approach was a little bit different. I had gone through some other just hard things in life, and I just didn't have, like, I don't know, I was realizing that this is my brain. And if my identity relies so much on jujitsu and being this certain type of person in jujitsu, that I'm willing to risk my brain health. And I mean, it was pretty scary for me. I felt very disoriented and very uh, out of it. I did not feel like myself. And I think of myself as a pretty cerebral person. And to not
Hmm.
be able to operate that way, or to be completely exhausted from just thinking, it was new for me. And it kind of made me realize that I need to figure out how to be okay if jujitsu isn't in the cards for me. Um, and that was hard and that was scary. And that's part of what inspired me to start my Instagram page, and kind of inspired me to start learning differently. Prior to my concussions, I was very much a train super hard, everyday Pohada type of girl. And, being tough was not my weakness, being technical was. And so when I started having issues with concussions, it really just motivated me to find a better way to learn, to find a better way to train. And I wish I had been learning and training this way my entire time in jujitsu. Because let me tell you what, like, if we compare effort to progress, maybe not effort might not be the right word, but the ratio of progress to mat time and like damage to my body is at an all-time low. Mat time, I still have a lot of mat time, but not nearly as much as when I was a blue belt, even early purple belt. But my progress is exponentially more. And some of this could be because I have a decade of experience behind me. However, I still think it's disproportionately greater now compared to back then, just because my methods are so much more effective.
I love it. I love how open you are about it, because it's so refreshing to hear somebody not coming out and going like Gordon Ryan, I'm just the best because I know it all, And I love this side of jiu-jitsu practitioners where they're kind of like, yeah, I struggle with this. This is why I help. This is how I needed help, and there's so many people that leave the sport because they can't get over that initial hurdles. And I love how you thought that this was it. You weren't going to be able to continue jiu-jitsu. So you started an Instagram page that's helping thousands and thousands of people get better at jiu-jitsu and be better human beings. And you were kind of just like, well, it's just a last resort. And you're changing so many lives by doing this. And you should be super proud of the work that you do. And it's every time I look at one of your posts, I get something kind of that helps me cognitively as much as technique wise. And I think that's what makes you such a good coach, is you've been through the trenches, and you're open and willing to discuss it. How do you kind of work with, during that time that you had lost your job, that you went to live in a car, etc.? How did you deal with that real struggle? Because I was sort of thinking about that today. It's like, that'd be great if you were doing it, but not if it's a negative. Like if you chose to do that lifestyle. And I've just left the job, and I can't remember what it's like not to be working. And I realized I tied myself up in the identity of being working for this company. And I was like, I don't know who I am anymore. How did you realign yourself back to becoming this badass, this amazing version of Rose that we see today?
Well, I think for me, a couple of things. There's two separate times I've lived in a vehicle. So the first time was I was still a white belt, I believe, and I was working at a gym, and the gym I worked out closed. The owner didn't even tell us that they were closing. I just showed up for work one day. Doors were locked. Yeah, and my roommate had already. Well, that's a longer situation. I had a little stalker for a period of time, so I kind of wanted to move out of this place because the police weren't doing anything about it, and my roommate's partner was moving in. So